and this is Daniel from Pocketables with the first of hopefully many of our weekly news roundups. We've got a couple of things going on as far as PC hardware and Android hardware are concerned. We also have some Android software drama going on. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to go ahead and start off with the big scary one. A security flaw has been found in the DSP on most of your modern Snapdragon chips. The current estimates put roughly 1 billion devices at risk. Unfortunately, as a hardware flaw, there's not a whole ton that we can do right now. We just kind of have to wait for Google and the device makers to figure this out, which is, to be blunt, honestly terrifying, since I've seen information that this flaw may be accessible via drive-by, can be used to bypass the Android security model. So I'm hoping to see a quicker response than normal from this, both on Google's side and the Android OEMs. We've seen a couple of updates for Android devices start to show up this week, but none, as far as I'm aware, are being used to patch this as of yet. To our knowledge, there's no active exploits, so that's good. That said, once a flaw is uncovered and disclosed publicly, it is a race against the clock. I would expect most major devices, so phones from Samsung, OnePlus, LG, your big device manufacturers, to be patched relatively quickly. Some of your budget brands that aren't known for software updates may be in a different boat, unfortunately, and we'll see how that all turns out in a month or two, I suppose. On the more exciting hardware news side, Microsoft officially announced the release date and the pre-order availability for the Surface Duo phone. This is a two-screen folding device that, quite honestly, sends me back to the early days of Android with phones like the Kyocera Echo when I look at it. But this is a very different device in general. We've got an 8.1-inch tablet mode with a 3:2 screen ratio on the screens itself. The specifications are high-end for 2019. We're packing a Snapdragon 855 with an 11-megapixel camera. Not too hung up on the specific number of megapixels, since really the sensor size plays a big deal in there as well. You still have 4K video recording. The biggest downside to me looking at the Surface Duo right now is the battery looks rather small for an 855 device, especially with a screen that size. At 3577 milliamp hours, that is smaller than the 5000 milliamp hour battery in my OnePlus 7 Pro that some days I don't get a full day of battery life on. So with twice the screens, a smaller battery is going to be an interesting challenge. That said, there's plenty of options as far as power management Microsoft could have taken to help mitigate that. Maps on the software side is back on Apple Watch soon, officially coming soon. It hasn't been available for 3 years. Maps is going to be back on Apple Watch devices soon, offering driving, walking, biking, and public transport accessibility. From a personal standpoint, the idea of using maps on a watch is not super exciting to me, but I can see the advantage, especially for the walking side of it, walking around with your phone. Staring at your phone screen, you tend to miss things. Walking around, just glancing at your watch as you're coming around buildings, not necessarily as distracting, not going to take you out of what you're doing as much. So I'm glad to see it come back. I hope to see maps show up on other watches soon. That said, I'm not holding my breath to see it show up on my Garmin. Fortnite has been the source of quite a bit of drama this week. Epic introduced a new payment method that allowed users to bypass the iOS and Android stores to pay Epic directly for Fortnite's, I believe they call them V-Bucks. Apple reacted first and didn't take too kindly to this, rather quickly removing the app for a policy violation. Google followed suit and stated that although the app doesn't comply with Play Store requirements anymore, it can still be installed using the Epic app on Android devices. So a bit of a difference in approach there. You just can't install it on iOS anymore. On Android, Google's stance is that, well, it doesn't comply with the Play Store, but you can still install it this way. Kind of how they've approached other apps like this. Probably the largest example of a store that has exceeded any would be Amazon's store. At least here in the US, there are, of course, regional stores for places like China that provide apps for users as well. Epic has responded by starting a lawsuit for anti-competitive behavior, and for a skeptical eye looking at this, I almost wonder if that was their end goal here. They had to know ahead of time before making this change that the response was at least going to be Apple removing it from their store. So hopefully we get some kind of results from that soon, but lawsuits never move quick, so I wouldn't anticipate anything at least in the next year. On the PC hardware side, we have Nvidia's RTX 3080 coming hopefully by the end of this month. Nvidia has been making no small amount of noise about an event that they're having on August 31st. They've been also making a lot of fuss about their earlier GeForce cards, circa 1999. That makes me think that we're going to see some kind of 20th anniversary edition card, either at or shortly after the launch when we get the new 3000 series cards. I'm fairly confident that we're going to see at least a paper launch at the end of the month. The specs and details on the 3000 series cards have been starting to leak left and right over the past few months, so we're rapidly approaching when it would make sense to launch the hardware anyway. Having an event like this tends to highlight that they're planning on announcing something. We already have Ampere cards available for the data center, so it's not an unknown quantity here either. All that said, thank you for tuning in. Hopefully we touched on something that you may have missed this week. We picked a couple of the larger news items for this first episode. Some of our own content that's worth checking out. Earlier today, we published a video finally finishing our review of the VOTech GFV 24C. That was a pleasure of a monitor to work with. We also last week published a video on a TrendNet 10G base T card that was absolutely stunning from a performance standpoint. On the note of our own coverage, Paul has been talking recently about the YouTube playlists being playable from the Home Assistant now, specifically in regards to YouTube Music. I know that's a big one for Paul. He uses music playlists a ton. Personally, I don't have any experience in there, so I'm actually going to defer to Paul's article for the details on that. We also now have real-time translation from Gboard. Both of those articles went up earlier on our website, and there's going to be links in the description below. Any news items we covered, we're going to have our sources cited in the description below. Please feel free to check those out. If there is something that we didn't touch on this week that you're interested in hearing about, send us a tip, and we will make sure to include it going forward. With that said, I want to go ahead and thank Electrix, as always, for providing our opening and closing themes. And I want to thank our patrons for help sponsoring us and encouraging us to make content like this, as well as our other media sources. Please check both Electrics and our Patreon link out. There'll be links in the description, as well as cards in the video. Thank you for tuning in.